Communication, in my humble opinion, is the greatest tool we possess as humans. The ability to take an idea and place it into another person's mind is awe-inspiring if you really think about it. Coupled with the internet and its ability to take a message around the world in seconds, it can only get better. These are our conversations. Hope you enjoy. All right, guys. Welcome back again to Listen, Learn, and Ask Questions. Today, we got Mr. Rahkim Sabree. He's going to tell you about all the wonderful things he does. Mount Vernon native out here, just trailblazing in the sense of finance and representation. Mr. Rahkim Sabree, thank you for coming, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
How you doing today, brother?
I am good.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your resume.
My spiel.
The spiel. Give us the.
Ah, man. So I'm an author, 2 times, TEDx speaker, nonprofit co-founder, and financial empowerment coach.
Nice. So I know you got your book here, and I know that's where we're gonna be staying at mostly. So I want to save that for last.
No problem.
So financial empowerment coach.
Sure.
You look like me, which possibly means you've had the same background when it comes to finance as me when it comes to sitting around the dinner table.
Sure.
We don't talk about finance. We don't discuss credit cards. You just cut up those papers when they come inside the mail. And you don't discuss your salary, which is that one, I don't know. That one's always weird to me.
Yeah.
So, what was your history with finance, and how did you actually get into the realm to actually become an expert or a storyteller of your story, and people can use that blueprint?
I often start off my stories by talking about my upbringing. My parents were young parents, 18, 17 years old when I was born. So really no financial blueprint, right? They're going at it alone, of course with support from other family, and helping raise me and my siblings. But I don't think at 18 years old you have a solid grasp of what financial empowerment or financial literacy looks like unless that's something that you were brought up with. And in our communities, like you said, that's not something that we're brought up with. So I think they were just kind of trying to figure it out as they were raising us. And so there was a ripple effect to that. When I became conscious of finances in the household, I realized that we had Section 8, we had food stamps, and I aspired for that. So when I start my talks, often I start off by saying that I aspire to be poor. And that, not that I wanted to be poor because I didn't realize that I was poor, but I wanted to have what it is that I knew, the food stamps, the Section 8. When I left New York in 2010, I spent a short period of time down in San Antonio, Texas, and then moved up to the Hartford area of Connecticut, where I started a career in financial services, banking in particular. So at 21 years old, I started as a part-time bank teller, and as part of, I guess, osmosis in trying to sell and educate people around the bank products, I had to learn how to use those products and also witness people as they came in and how they manage their own finances. And so I kind of got a good grasp of what the spectrum looks like in terms of money management, from individuals who are living paycheck to paycheck to individuals with, those 6 zeros or more sitting in their account. And I was privileged. I mean, I moved around a lot in the company. I rose through the ranks quickly. And so I was able to work with different demographics where you have, your regular middle class, blue collar worker, and you have some people who have wealth management, right? So they're not even touching their money. They got other people to touch their money for them. And in sitting with the different people, understanding, as I'm trying to sell them a product, right? How they use their money, why they make the decisions that they do, what instruments or vehicles they park their money in. And really got a lot of exposure to things like trust, business accounts, the different types of business accounts, the different types of trust. Seen some like horror stories around succession planning. So, grandma dies and what happens to all her money, who gets it, who's entitled to it, and that process from a financial perspective, and really everything in between. And I took what I learned through that experience and incorporated a lot of it into my own practices, but also it kind of piqued the curiosity from me, if you will, in that I wanted to learn more. So I went out, I read, I always talk about reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and how that book really changed my life and changed my perspective around what the difference between assets and liabilities were, and why it's important to build a business, but not only to build a business, but to build a system so that you're not working for your business. And so really that was a foundation for shaping my outlook on what personal finance looked like for me, but it also created a charge in me to share what it is that I learned with other people.
Nice. So I've been following you for a while, so I kind of like, because I've been following you for a while and I've engaged in your conversations that you've had on social media, I like to bring up some of the like key points that you have said throughout your posts, even if you remember them or not.
Yeah.
But I remember one time you actually said that financial illiteracy has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of money that's in your bank account. You've said that you have sat down with people who were millionaires, but because of the fact that they've never touched their money, they had absolutely no idea what they were doing and were actually in worse situations than people that were worth $50,000-$60,000.
Sure, or less.
Yeah, or less.
Or less, definitely. So I think when you're coming from a place of poverty, financial poverty, every cent counts, right? And we know this, right? Growing up in our communities, you shop for the deals, buy one get one free or buy one get three free, and so there's a little bit more accounting, I think, when there are people who are poor and they're dependent on those pennies. But I'll tell a story to that point. I sat across from this lady who she had significant balances in her account, and she wasn't getting approved for this home equity loan. That was her whole thing. She was looking for a home equity line of credit. She got denied. She didn't understand why. So she gets the denial letter, and it's telling her something with her credit. The lady brings me a stack of papers this big that was her credit report. And I'm looking through the credit report, and I'm seeing that she has delinquencies on her credit cards, Nordstrom, Macy's, just, different credit cards that she had used, retail credit cards that she had used. And I'm like, you didn't pay this credit card in months, like literal months. And she's like, really? I didn't think I had to pay them right now. I'll pay them when I get to them. And I'm like, that's not how credit works. But it was eye-opening to me because she had a large balance in her account and, could really basically get whatever she wants. But she's abusing credit in a way that doesn't matter to her because she has the means to pay for the things that she wants to pay for. So she didn't understand how to manage credit. She just knew that her money was being managed by somebody else. And so it's just kind of like, whatever, I'm just going to live my life. And it was introspective moment for me because I was like, man, like, you don't have to have your hands on the wheel for your finances. You just kind of go on autopilot. But I've seen horror stories result from situations like that where, maybe the main breadwinner in the household passes away, and now the wife has to, start paying the bills and allocate the funds appropriately, and they've never touched a checkbook, they've never touched a bill, they've never touched a credit card, and so they don't know what to do. They're confused. They have all this money sitting in their account, but they have to make a living and frantic. And I kid you not, there was a lady, she came in for weeks at a time, every day, looking for me to help her navigate the mess that had been created as a result of the situation. Mm-hmm. So, financial education, I like to say, is not just for poor people. Financial education is for everybody. I think poor people and specifically poor people within our communities need financial education because it's something that we don't get frequently. Mm-hmm. But anybody can benefit from financial education, especially if you're not in a place or you haven't been in a place to receive that education and then execute on it.
Speaker. Where did becoming a speaker play into your overall plan, or where did that come in? Yeah. And what are your goals when it comes to speaking?
It came in probably after I wrote my first book, 2018. I sat through 2 workshops, and the facilitators were women, and they delivered the workshop flawlessly. I mean, I was extremely impressed, blown away, and I said, you know what, I could do this. I could do this. I could impact people in the way that I was impacted. And so I approached both of them afterwards, and I just asked them, you know, how do you get into doing this? How do you get into doing this full time? And they gave me both their perspectives. And I think the prevailing piece of advice that they gave me was, you need some credibility. Like, what is your credibility? And at the time I was working on my first book, so I hadn't quite finished it yet. One of them said, well, you know, you need to finish your book. And that really kind of lit a fire for me to finish that, so I could have something that I could speak to. And then the other one, she just told me, you got to get out there. Get out in front of as many people as you can, and have, you know, a general kind of theme around what you talk about, so you're not just talking. And I took both of their advice. I finished my first book. I decided to, you know, go out there, talk about what I wrote about, and then eventually start talking about the thing that most people associated with me, and that was, you know, personal finance.
Nice, nice. So, TEDx.
Yeah.
TEDx. You know, we always got to get into TEDx, man. That's that. Those are those 4 red letters on your resume. When you put it on your resume, make sure you put it in the red.
Yeah.
I don't know if they tell you what the font is, but you got to find the font and you got to put it just like it's written on the screen. Talk about your TEDx speech. What was it about, and how did that come about for your life?
So I think there's a second part to the question that you asked me. So I apologize for not kind of digging deeper, but when I started speaking, and, you know, it was recent, right? I said 2018. I thought about what was the quickest way for me to gain credibility. And the quickest way for me to gain credibility in my eyes as a speaker was to have, you know, those 4 letters, as you mentioned, associated with my name. So I searched what the local TED was. There was one in Hartford, so, you know, that was convenient for me. I reached out to them. I was like, hey, how do I become a part of this? And they told me that I needed to wait until the application period opened. So frequently check our website was the advice. But I know the world of social media. So I went to their Instagram page and their Facebook page, and I turned on the post notifications. And as soon as they had a notification that said applications are open, I went in and I applied. So my talk was around financial empowerment. It was actually titled Financial Empowerment is a Team Sport. And basically, I walk through my experience coming from a place of poverty physically and a place of poverty mentally, and how I was able to change that by establishing a team. And my call to action in delivering that talk was to join a team, to establish a team. So if you have information that someone else can benefit from, particularly financial, share that. And if you're in a place where you don't have that information, and you need to get that information, find somebody who you can add to your team who can give that to you. And so in talking through my experiences, I talk about professionals like CPAs, real estate agents, lenders, financial advisors, because all of those people will have a piece to the puzzle that really shapes your financial perspective. And so my call to action really was, you know, go out there and mimic that blueprint, right? Get people around you who know what they're talking about. You don't have to do everything that they say. You don't have to agree with everything that they say, but at least have that perspective so that you can make a decision from an informed place.
Nice. I like that. So now we can jump in on your book, Financially Irresponsible.
Yeah.
Love the title, love the cover, love the book. Read it cover to cover. Where did this book come about?
After I wrote my first book, first off, people thought that the first book I wrote was around personal finance. So that was just kind of the thing that people associated with me, right? And I was actually adamantly opposed to writing a book on personal finance. I did not want to be pigeonholed into, you know, he's the finance guy, especially because I think some of my insecurities started to surface too in terms of credibility. I was not a licensed financial planner or financial advisor, and so that question came up. And so I frequently find myself, throwing out the disclaimer, hey, I'm not giving you advice. I'm just telling you about what I did. And I didn't want to navigate that space, you know, from a liability perspective. But also I didn't think that I had enough to share. Mm-hmm. I felt like it was something that I had just recently started learning. But when I really took inventory of my time in the space, and I've been working in financial services for close to 10 years. And in that time, through my experience, whether it be on the job or through my extracurricular learning, I've acquired quite a bit of knowledge that I didn't realize was common sense for me, but not common sense for most people. And so I did an exercise. I got with a business coach, and he said to me, if you were at an airport and somebody walks up to you and they say to you, hey, I need a speaker in the next 5 minutes. I'll pay you, name your price. I just need you to save me. What would your topic be? And I said, financial empowerment or financial literacy. And he says, well, that's what you need to write about. And so I draw the distinction between financial literacy and financial empowerment, particularly within that work, because financial literacy, I think, is understanding the building blocks that make you understand finance. But it doesn't necessarily have with it that piece of action involved in implementing what it is that you know. Whereas financial empowerment, I think, speaks to what is your confidence and what is your belief about whether or not you can achieve the things that you set out to achieve or the goals that you set for yourself. So I spend a lot of time in that book, actually the first half of the book, really focused on mindset first, your spiritual and your mental relationship with money, and then I go into the financial literacy piece. And so I do think that the terms are used interchangeably, but financial literacy is kind of like, that's the buzzword, right? And so when somebody hears financial empowerment, I think it makes it a little bit softer too. Whereas you hear the word literacy, you might associate that with your intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so, the ego might surface, right? Your pride might surface and say, well, I'm not unintelligent. I make bad decisions, or I don't know where I'm at. Or you might not talk about it at all. And so the empowerment piece talks to really embracing what you don't know and going out and finding how to close that gap between where you are and where you would like to be.
Nice. So, get into a few topics from the book because I love the book. I read the book. There was a story. If I'm not mistaken, the story had to do with it was a biblical story. I'm horrible with the Bible. I apologize. Love God. That's spirituality. But God he had 3 servants.
The 10 talents.
And he gave them each talents.
Yeah.
The one he gave the most to went out, got more talents, brought more talents back. Second most did the same thing. The one he gave the least to buried it, brought back the exact same thing, and God was displeased because he did not multiply what was already given to him. And I think that is directly spoken to when we talk about poverty. When we talk about poor people, save your money, save your money, save your money. What are we saving our money for? And it's funny because people say, the stock market is risky, real estate is risky, all this stuff is risky. But, and like you had touched in your book, those can go up or down. So it's a 50-50 chance. You put your money in your savings account, or if you put your money in under your bed, the shoebox under your bed.
Yep.
There's only one way it's going. It's going down. That money will never gain buying power, will always lose it due to inflation. Mm-hmm. How do we get our people to understand that concept of inflation and understand also, because I heard somewhere it's like, because we don't understand what somebody's doing, like somebody will see what you're doing and say, wow, that's risky, spending all this money to make a book, you don't know if it's going to sell, spending all this money to market yourself, spending all this money on consultants. But is it really risky? Because I'm sure you did your due diligence and you know that everything you're doing is building your brand and building your credibility. So I don't think it's a risk for you. It's a sacrifice and you have to make that choice to do it, but it's Absolutely. Not a risk because there's a really good chance it's going straight to the sky. And if not, you've learned something for it to take to your next adventure and apply that to it. But like you said, saving money in a bank account, there's only one direction.
So you gave me a lot, and I want to answer that.
Yes, I apologize.
I want to answer that in a lot of different ways, but I'll start off with how you started off. So I use that story from Matthew about the 10 talents in response to that was actually the first chapter, in response to the often misquoted phrase "money is the root of all evil." And so I go into talking about how the actual Bible quote is "the love of money is the root of all evil," and I talk about that first because I feel like people, particularly our people, tend to have this internalized sense of guilt as it relates to desiring money or desiring to acquire money. And so my attempt to address that guilt was talking about the 10 talents, and that not only do I feel money is not the root of all evil, or even the love of money is the root of all evil, but I feel like we're obligated, based off of that scripture, to go out and multiply our opportunities and get more money. And so that was kind of my illustration in doing so. Man, you talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, I apologize. So,
the next thing was about saving, and
yeah.
how do we get our people to understand kind of what's happening with the savings, right? I think historically, our people are good at saving, and I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a book that I quote frequently in mine called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Yeah.
And that book talks about a lot of the internalized traumas and that are reminiscent of PTSD, where our people, because we've never had a break from the time of slavery, particularly financially, economically, we exhibit behaviors, or we have tendencies to do things that are passed down through those fears, those anxieties, and how we manage our money is a part of that, right? So we have this mentality that we need to just hoard, because, what if? And we don't have the education around how to grow what it is that we're making or what it is that we're saving for. So the answer to your question, how do we get more people to understand that? I think we need to study economics. I think that we need to study politics. We need to understand markets. And I'm not saying that we need to become experts at it, because by no means am I an expert in any of those fields. But I understand the movement of money and the fact that money needs to move. And so if you're holding it in one place, then you're defeating the purpose of that money, right? There's supposed to be an exchange there. There's supposed to be an exchange of goods and services. And what we do is we hoard money for the purpose of savings, but then we go out and we embrace this consumerism that is rampant in this country, right? And we're spending money on things that are really liabilities, right? They lose value. They look good for, however long they look good, whatever the shelf life is, and then there's no value to it. So I think there needs to be a mindset shift, and I think that there is a mindset shift that is occurring very slowly within popular culture, whether it be through rap music, whether it be through demonstration of what a lot of the athletes are doing with their investments and investing practices, so that people are starting to become more aware of, oh, you know what, I don't need to have a lot of money to do this, or I can start doing this now, or at the very least I can aspire to do this. And I think there was one other thing that you said I don't remember.
I barely remember it myself. I'm gonna go back. I have to go back on the video and get you a call it to answer that one. No, it was just really we got to it because we talked about the talents. You actually
talked about the return of investment. The return on investment and
is
really,
it a risk? It's not a risk to you because.
So when I wrote my book, I didn't expect to break even or even to make a profit in terms of the amount of money that I put into it, right? So I said I spent money on a consultant that cost me a nice amount of money. I spent money on distribution. I spend actively money on marketing. But my intention in writing the book was really to give. So this was definitely more of a giving interaction than it was a receiving one. And certainly there's a cost associated, right? Because if you don't put value on it, nobody else will. But the return on investment for me is seeing how it impacts other people, the way that they think, their perspective, what feedback they've given me, if they implement any of the change that I suggest or recommend in my book, and sharing my story. This is a ticket for me into, anybody's conference, anybody's classroom, anybody's podcast or a talk show, right? I have something to speak to, a body of work, and then it speaks to legacy, right? So our people, we tend to be very short-minded or short-sighted when it comes to our thought process. And I think that as a result of trauma, we don't know, are we going to make it till tomorrow? Are we going to make it till next week? Are we going to make it till 30, till 40, till 50? And so we don't have in our practice long-term planning. And for me, I've embraced the long-term planning kind of methodology in that when I'm long gone, this book's still going to be circulating, right? Mm-hmm. There's royalties that are still going to be collected based off of people's purchasing behaviors. And hopefully, when I wrote this book, my inspiration and the impact that I wanted to have on other people is the same impact that reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad had on me. So I could attribute a lot of my success financially to having sat down and read that book one day and saying, you know what, I understand assets and liabilities now. I understand starting a business. I understand the cash flow quadrant, right? And how do I make money through different mediums? Mm-hmm. And so I want people to go out and, become successful based off of me sharing my story.
And one of the things when you talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one of the things that your book does a lot differently is, that's it, you look like me.
Yep.
You look like me. You are somebody who was born in the same era that I was born in. You face the same challenges of finance that I faced, where sometimes you read a book by somebody who was in their 50s and what they're saying isn't wrong, but it was a lot easier to buy a house back when they were 20-something. Houses maybe cost $60,000. Now all of a sudden houses cost $400,000, $500,000, $200,000, $300,000, and it's just like, where do I even start to be able to begin to collect that type of money? And then another thing about your representation that's very important to me is you weren't a drug dealer. Sorry to say it, there's a lot of people who are on the wrong side of the tracks, and they started. And sometimes when I look at them and they're like, yeah, I started my first business, I'm not gonna lie, I'm skeptic. I'm like, where'd you get the capital, my man? Mm-hmm. You ain't never worked before. Now all of a sudden you have capital to start a business, and that's kind of discouraging. But you've eliminated both of those excuses that I could use to say, oh, I can't do it, or that another kid may say, oh, I can't do it because I'm not. No, here's a guy who sat down, did it the right way, and made it happen. And you brought representation to the table, and you had a hashtag that said representation matters.
Yeah. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, where did that realization come from, and where did that Twitter thread come from?
So I've been I'm active on social media. I'm very active on social media in that I ran an ad recently that talked about me as a black entrepreneur, right? Black entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, two-time author, nonprofit co-founder. And I guess it bothered some people that I started off that list of credentials as a black entrepreneur. And so, when you're running ads, you don't know who's going to see it and who's going to interact with it. But I've had a few people reach out and say, why does it matter that you're black? And I'm just like, the fact that you're asking that question is why it matters. It's something that really bothered me because it's not the first time or the second time that I've heard it. And so it matters because, like you said, representation matters. Some of my strategy in writing my book and how I overcame my insecurities around whether or not I was worthy of delivering this kind of content was focused on the fact that, like you said, I'm not 50 years old. I'm not talking from my ivory tower where, I have millions or billions of dollars, right? I'm in the same struggle that the people that I wrote this book for are in, but I have understanding where I know that, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I'm not going to be in that same struggle because I'm going to implement everything that I talked about, or I've already implemented the things that I've talked about. And so I wanted that relatability and that connectability to exist. I often quote, people that consider financial gurus like, Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki and Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman and, all of those guys who write for their demographic. But, I don't know anybody, I shouldn't say that. I don't know too many people who write for our demographic, right? And so in that, I wanted there to be representation for, the next person to either feel inspired to write their own book, feel inspired to go down the path of starting their own business, whether that be in the nonprofit world or for-profit world, and then also feel empowered to, kind of take control of their finances, know that it's possible to make your own way.
One of the things that you spoke about in your book, and I wanted to ask you, paying for a mentor. Mm-hmm. do you think that you can or it's wise to pay for a mentor?
Yes, is the simple answer. I think that if you're not in a position to pay for a mentor, if it's gonna, break the bank for you, that then it's not wise, right? You don't have the money to do it. But there's a huge return on investment when you are, especially if you vet out that mentor, right? So you know what their track record is, you know that they can bring you to the level that they are or beyond. Most people can't bring you to a level that they haven't reached. And so, I think it's important to have mentor in every avenue of life, whether it be your career, working career, as a friend, you know, writing a book. I mean, everybody that I surround myself with, I kind of consider to be mentors to me. And that's, going back to my first book, right? I talk about how mentoring is traditionally associated with somebody who has a lot more experience than you do, or somebody who's a lot older than you. And I redefine mentorship as being, anyone that you allow to influence your thoughts, your beliefs, your behaviors. Mm-hmm. And so that includes your friends, that includes your family, your parents, and, what are you getting out of those people? What are they telling you that you can or you can't do? But there's a lot of people out there who are hugely successful that they don't have it in them to give up their time freely. And so there's a cost, right? You're spending an hour, 2 hours, you're asking them questions about their experiences. They're giving you the answers and the keys to like the castle. Their time is worth something. And so I think in that regard, it's absolutely essential or absolutely within reason for them as mentors to charge. But as somebody who, could be a mentee to pay.
This is my thing to you, though. Should we, well, I'm not going to say should we. I personally believe that we should call it what it is, and that's an advisor. Because I think it's very dangerous to start this culture of mentorship being a paid service. Because then for the high school student, how do they approach somebody and ask them to be their mentor if they grow up in this society where everybody's asking for $150 mentorship calls, $10,000 mentorship one-on-one once a month? Like, I think we're being very detrimental to the mentorship culture if we start calling paid advisory mentorship. Like, one of my biggest mentors is I have two. Michelle Gordon, or Michelle Gordon Bartley now. Miss Michelle Gordon Bartley. She was my mentor when I was growing up. I was a part of Healthy from Birth for Life. She was the project manager for Healthy from Birth for Life. She got paid to be the project manager from Healthy from Birth for Life, and that's where I engaged and interacted with her. But she became my mentor when her advice kind of, I wouldn't say stepped out of her role, but her advice wasn't circulated around the program anymore. It all of a sudden became, oh, Mike, you're having problems with school. You need to do this. She wasn't there for my schooling. And then there's Professor Steve Nardozzi. He taught me EMS. He became my mentor because I would sit in his office for hours, way past my class, and just talk to him about life. So I don't know if we're going down a very dangerous path where we're going to stop the youth from being able to look for mentors if we keep calling an advisory mentorship. Like just like you had said, between like financial literacy and financial empowerment, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they're kind of two different concepts.
Yep.
And that's kind of the way, and I didn't know, and I wanted to get your feedback on that.
So I agree with you to the extent that not all mentoring relationships should have a cost associated with it, but I think it really depends on how you define mentoring. And it's not that we're creating a culture because the culture is already created, right? There's people out there who call themselves mentors, and they're charging for their services. They're charging for their expertise, their experience. But then there's people out there who are willing to share and pay it forward out of the kindness of their hearts. And, I've experienced both. And I am both, right? So, I think coaching is a more appropriate term. But when it comes to mentorship, I think the mentor, different from an advisor, has a stake in has a personal stake in or investment in seeing what your success looks like, whereas an advisor is just, okay, you're paying me, here's a service. It's very transactional. I think there's a fine line, but you could be a mentor who's getting paid and really be passionate about what your mentee's success looks like. And so maybe that passion extends beyond the 15 or 30 minute consultation call. And you say, you know what, I'm gonna keep you on the phone for a little bit longer, but I'm not gonna charge you. And so you're getting the benefit of their expertise, you're getting the benefit of their experiences, but you're also getting the benefit of them as a person. They're pouring into you. And so I straddle that line too, right, where I'm like, man, I had a 15-minute, I kid you not, last week, 15-minute consultation call that lasted 30 minutes. And the 15-minute consultation call was free, right? So I didn't get paid on any end. But let's say I was charging, then I would have charged for the 15 minutes and I would have kept talking. Do I continue to charge them because I wanted to keep talking? Or do I cut off at the end of the clock and say, hey, sorry, we're done. 15 minutes is up, can't keep talking to you. Like, no, the person I was talking to, I had an interest in sharing more or hearing more about what their experiences were. And I wanted to kind of continue that conversation. And people appreciate that. But I said something earlier in that if you don't assign value to it, nobody else will. So how many mentoring interactions do you have where you're arguing with your mentee, right? I have a mentee that I argue with all the time. Like I'm sitting here, I'm telling you, this is what you need to do. I've experienced what you're experiencing. I've been where you're at. You could take my advice or you cannot take my advice. It's not going to make a difference to my day. But this is where I want you to be. This is what I need you to do. They'll argue back and forth with me. If there's money involved, he's not going to argue with me. He's going to say, okay, when we're done, you pay me, our transaction is over. You can agree or disagree with what it is that I shared with you, but you're not going to waste your money in a 30-minute consultation arguing with me about what it is that I share with you. You're going to sit there and you're going to soak up everything that I have to say, and then afterwards you'll deal with that off the clock. And so, like I said, there's a balance that needs to be kind of struck when it comes to mentoring and definitely the cost associated with it.
Nice. So, what's your social media? Where can people find you?
Social media is my name. I made it very easy. So Instagram and Twitter is Rahkim Sabree. No space. It's RAHKIM SABR and 2 E's. LinkedIn is my name. And my website really has all my everything. All my talks, how to get in contact with me, how to schedule an appointment with me. And my website is my name as well. It's RahkimSabree.com.
Nice. Mr. Rahkim Sabree, 2-time author, TEDx speaker, co-founder of a foundation. Oh, almost forgot to talk about that. Can you give us a little blurb about your
the
foundation?
Nonprofit? Sure. I'm wearing my my branded hoodie. So the nonprofit is called An Extended Hand. I'm a co-founder, and the initiative is homelessness. So we're trying to address homelessness. And what we found is that homelessness is usually addressed from a symptomatic approach in that, okay, how do we provide temporary housing or maybe long-term housing, but not address the root of the issue. And what is the root of the issue, right? There's a variety of factors that lead into that. So our organization is really centered around providing financial education, providing healthcare advocacy, and then also job development and those kind of things as programs so that we're addressing the root and the symptom simultaneously.
Nice. Mr. Rahkim Sabree, thank you, brother, for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.